In today's creator economy, monetizing your audience is only half the game. The real power lies in building authentic, scalable partnerships. You don't need millions of followers. You need a clear niche and real engagement. Brands are very interested in finding the right creators faster, but without clear positioning and contactability, you're invisible. I sat down with Ryan Davis, co-founder of People First, to break it all down. This episode is your blueprint for monetization, creative control, and metrics. Let's get into it. How can a creator position themselves to be sought after by brands to work with them?
I think by trying to capture a very specific niche, we're moving away from these really broad influencers who have, a lot of topics, focus on, business or health or travel or beauty or these specific niches. These are the folks who are really growing the audiences that brands want to talk to. So, somebody like yourself who's created a podcast where they're talking to founders and they're talking to business strategists, positioning yourself to get a lot of outreach from sort of B2B campaigns. And that's something we see happening a lot more in the influencer space, B2B, LinkedIn. These things weren't even talked about 5 years ago. And now, everyone's trying to crack the code there.
Do you think AI has its place in this kind of drive towards B2B collaborations?
I think AI has a place as a collaborator, as a thought partner. I think AI content is not going to perform as well as sort of real, authentic human content. And that's sort of what we sort of stake their business on, that people are going to want to still hear from real people, and that there's going to be a flood of AI content. And one of the ways that businesses will be able to say that they are different is to have real people versus AI content. Yeah, AI is a tool, but I think ultimately the end product should really be centered on people.
I guess what I meant by that was, do you see a drive in AI-based companies and products looking to do these B2B collaborations?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, the amount of AI startups that are trying to sort of explain what they do to folks in the market has increased. And, if you have a new product out that is an AI powered HR platform, who better to talk about that to the buyer, which is ultimately HR folks, than other HR folks? So, we would find those, HR professionals to talk about this product, what it's doing, how AI is making their lives easier. You take those 5 to 10 videos and you put them up against an audience of other HR professionals, and all of a sudden, you're kind of inside this community having the discussion.
I feel like it's always been difficult to grow as a business podcast specifically because there might be another type of creator that's only making finance content. And so every person that comes to them knows they're going there for finance content, and YouTube knows that they're putting out finance content. Where I might have an episode about marketing, and then the next episode might be about sales, and the next might be about HR, and the next might be about product, because every business owner that I'm interviewing is different. Their background is different, their focus is different. And so how can someone like me that is running a business podcast be able to monetize that with sponsorships, knowing that there's so many things that I can talk about? So like you were talking about this HR platform. Well, I have a degree in psychology and I have a background in HR management. I did HR management for several companies before I started my own company, and I've had multiple companies that I hired and fired and managed the policies for. So I could talk about that, but someone might not think about me because they see me as a business podcast host.
Yeah, I think, when we're putting together a campaign, we might say put together multiple personas. So depending on who the buyer is, it might be strict HR folks, but it might be, people, business podcasters who talk about, these topics. So, but you would be coming from it from a slightly different perspective than somebody who worked in HR right now at a company, right? Like, I'm running HR now. You're a thought leader. You talk to a lot of people. You can talk about it from a perspective. And I think that there are thinking about the different way these messengers ultimately influence people's decision making. You might be a really strong messenger for one type of buyer, and an HR person in the current position might be as strong. So, you would mix it up, test it. But small business owners, SMB owners, those folks we're always trying to reach them with so many campaigns. And a podcast like this, I feel like that is like probably a large chunk of your audience are folks who are like startup founders, trying to figure it out. So like, I think this is well positioned, and it's just like it becomes sort of like a discovery issue. It's like, how do we find like, who to work with, who's going to turn around videos fast, who's going to respond to us, who's easy to find, make, it's really simple things, making sure your website makes it really easy to contact you, make sure your social channels have a business email to contact you, let people know that you're actually open to collaborations and you're more likely to receive offers.
I've been receiving a lot of offers because I have made it clear on my video descriptions, on my channel description, on my website. I have a sponsors page with previous examples, things like that. What is the process from the agency's point of view of finding someone? And so, like, for example, someone reached out to me and they said, "Hey, give us your quote."
Right.
And I'm like, okay, but like, what is that for, right? What's the scope of the project? And like, who is the client and when do you need it by? And right. So like, you're asking me for a quote, but I'm getting nothing to work
Yeah.
with. How am I supposed to give you a quote? So then I have to start digging for questions. And one of them was like, well, we're getting like a bunch of quotes and then we're just sending it to the client and seeing what they think. And so it seems like that client is just focused on what's the least I can pay to get this done.
Yeah, that sounds like a bad client. We don't structure deals like that. So we would reach out to you and be like, "Hey, we're working with an HR platform. It's a new platform. It's got AI integration that does X, Y, Z. We think that your podcast has an audience that's interesting. Is this something you would be interested in?" And then if you say yes, then we give you more information on what the deliverables would be, which is exactly what you're asking. What is the time frame? What are the amount of, how many videos are you delivering? Specifics. And then we would give you an offer based on your audience and engagement rate and the video content that we are asking you to produce. And then you would be free to counter on that. But, most create, we try to get, within, we have like an algorithm that determines what we think the video is worth. Now there are like ups and downs on that. If you are really specific, and because it is so expensive, if you are like an expert in, we just had to find experts in aviation for a client, and we needed to get 5 aviation experts to talk, people with like very specific aviation backgrounds to talk about a very specific thing. And boy, was that hard, because it wasn't hard to necessarily find the experts, but it was hard to find the experts who wanted to opt in to getting paid to talk about, X, Y, Z. And so that's where it gets really difficult.
What are some ways to get yourself blacklisted from working with an agent?
That is a great question. So, generally, the U.S. is in an interesting political situation, because what that question, the answer to that question is different now than it would have been 16 months ago. I think brands would have been more conservative, more lowercase conservative about the kind of folks that they were working with. So they would probably avoid creators who were like seen as maybe too right wing. I don't think that would be the case anymore. If anything, it would be like if you've posted too much left-wing political content. So political content in general scares brands away. Too much political content. So that it can be a flag. And then obviously, like, you would be surprised at how conservative some other organizations can be in regards to things like too much swimwear. Normal adult alcohol use can be a flag, which I think is like ridiculous. Like, and I'm talking about like swimwear, like somebody was at the beach in June and they were like drinking a mimosa, like a totally normal, and this is not like all their content. Most of their content is them, doing totally other different stuff. So surprising things can flag. Extreme politics is definitely one of the up there. And then, we're automatically getting rid of any accounts that would have, any racist or sexist or homophobic memes. All that stuff just gets kind of automatically pulled out of the database, because we're ingesting like all publicly available information across all these social networks to help us find their creators. So we're getting all that data, and we're looking for keywords. We're looking for, people who have certain audiences on certain networks.
I guess I was thinking more of like, so like the last sponsor I was working with the PR firm, and the PR firm, or I was working with the PR manager at the firm,
Yeah.
and the PR manager was working with the client. So I never got to talk to the client directly, which is fine and not necessary as far as I'm concerned.
Sometimes we don't even get to talk to the client directly, like, because we're working with the PR agency is hiring us to run their influencer, white labeled. So the client doesn't even know we exist, So the influencer is now like 4 people away from the actual person that's making the content.
As long as I get paid based on
Yeah.
my contractual requirements, I don't really care.
But there are other things, right? Things that probably like obvious tactical things, like if you buy fake followers, if you're buying fake engagement, if that stuff, you can't get away with it anymore. Like 10 years ago, there you could get away with like fake numbers, but now with all the network analysis tools that we have, we can tell if the engagement's fake. We can tell that, and like that, means we probably won't want to work with you. Another thing that people do that they think is helping, but ultimately is sort of engagement farming, is they form these sort of collectives. So like, me and you would be in a group with 48 other like business podcasters. And every time you published a podcast, you would drop it and you'd be like, hey, like this. And like that gets a lot of engagement. But what happens is engagement all from the same network. And we can see that. And it actually ends up looking like fake engagement, even if it's not. And so that kind of goes against what you're trying to do. Right.
Hmm. So one of the things that I was experiencing with this client that has me concerned that they may not work with me again, even though I liked the PR firm and the PR firm likes me, this is what it feels like, is that the client was extremely rigid and kept wanting to force me to make changes. And I pushed back on a lot of the changes, and they were like, they wanted to throw extra money at me. And I was like, you couldn't pay me $1 million to make that change. I'm sorry. I'm just not going to do it. Because that change takes my thumbnail from a good video to a obvious advertisement. And the PR firm was like, to be fair, it's an advertisement. I go, yes, I know it's an advertisement. The audience knows it's an advertisement and the client knows it's an advertisement, but I'm trying to make it feel like a story so that people actually click on it and watch the damn video.
It's a really bad note that they gave you. Like to be fair, it is an advertisement. Like, no, you don't want it to feel like an advertisement. Like the whole point is it shouldn't feel like an ad. If it feels like an ad, you're doing it wrong. And that defeats the point of having like this sort of a content. Even if it's produced, it shouldn't feel like an ad. It should feel like a comedy sketch. It should feel like a TikTok, like a viral TikTok thing. It shouldn't feel like an ad, even if it is an ad.
Yeah, I mean, the way I did it was part, like maybe 2 minutes of the 8-minute video. So it was an e-commerce focused platform where you can search for different business trends, market analysis,
Right.
these kinds of things based on a certain image or a prompt. And it's connected to Alibaba and other platforms. So you can get real insights from manufacturers. And I, in the past, in this year, was researching the idea of starting a vegan dog treat brand. This is real. So I spent about 2 minutes of the 8 minutes talking about my experience with this, with this idea and the research I was doing, and how when the brand came to me and asked me to do a video about them, I decided that I was going to talk about it and what I learned from using the platform to do some research. And at first, the client wanted me to get rid of that. And I was like, no, that's the thing that makes people think that this is like legitimate. Like, this is me sharing of myself and validating the fact that your product is actually good and interesting.
Right. And when we hire a creator, the whole idea is we are asking that creator to use their credibility with our audience, their expertise, their authority to validate the product. And so you're doing what they asked you to do. It seems like, here's the thing though, not all influencer marketing firms are the same. There are a lot of folks who are really leaning in still to the kind of the old school affiliate playbook, where it's very heavy, like put the CTA in the first 5 seconds kind of thing. And that's a certain way to sell a product if it's like way down the funnel. But, we think creators are incredible, like education, awareness, persuasion play. And that kind of that softer upper funnel stuff is so important. And creators can do that incredibly well. And then the folks who saw your video should be getting like a crazy direct, like 15% off, like direct CTA thing after they've seen the video that they're clicking on, like through remarketing. But that shouldn't be your job. They don't want that to be your job, because that kills your credibility with the audience.
Yeah. Luckily for me, this particular product is free to use. So I don't have to offer any deals or anything like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, actually, I had filmed the video, and they're like, at 1 minute and 29 seconds, we want you to add in there that like you can go like if you're so excited and you have to see the product, like you can go to the link in the description below. And I was like, why do I want to take people away from the video before it's finished?
Yeah.
I did it anyways because they were being annoying about it, but because then like I had to record these like 5 seconds, and I had to get B-roll to fill it because I didn't want to film my face for those 5 seconds.
Yeah.
And then my editor had to extend the video, and all of the aspects on the track and all the assets had to be shifted over by a few. It's like it was like 8 days of hell.
Now, when you do that, do you like, so part of our standard influencer contract is one round of revisions. If we're doing a video and working with like a celebrity or a really high level creator, they won't make a video. They'll send us basically a outline / mini script of what they want to do. The client will like approve that, and then they'll make the video. One round of feedback on that, in the, one round of feedback in the understanding that, everything in that outline was already approved. So like, we're not going back to that. And then the content can go live. With a micro creator, you can kind of get more rounds of revisions in, but that's the kind of thing that should be stipulated in the contract. And you should say, how many rounds of revisions are we going to go through?
They wanted 3. I said 2.
Yeah.
And they were pushing it very hard. And I was like, yeah, I'm not happy with that. So the experience made me realize that I needed to go to ChatGPT and generate a contract based on the things I will do and the things I won't do.
Right. That's a good idea.
Now I have a dedicated video contract and a podcast sponsorship contract. That way, anyone that wants to deal with me, they sign that thing, they understand all of the things. Like, yeah, I won't do it like that again.
So Stanford University did a big study that we provided some data for, where they looked at hundreds of thousands of influencer contracts. And then they looked at the content that was produced from those contracts. And they found that the more specific the brand was with the instructions to the creators, the least amount of freedom the creator got, the content at the end of that performed worse. So like, the more open that the contracts were to letting the creator make the content that they knew already fit their audience, the better it performed. So ultimately, the more feedback a client gives, even if they're trying to do their best, they actually can't know their audience as well as, your audience, or I know my audience, or Mr. Beast knows his audience, or whoever it is, right? Like, and that's the reason you're hiring the creator, and you've got to learn to give away your creative direction. The creator is now the creative director, and you're working with them, in that capacity.
And ChatGPT suggested all of those things in the contract that it generated for me. Is like, I have full creative control. Too bad. Deal with it.
Yeah, but I'm just telling you that not even from the influencer perspective, from the perspective of the brand, it's not a good idea. So if you're out there hiring creators, give them more, go in there with a very clear call to action. What's the objective of the content? But give them flexibility to speak to the audience, because they understand that audience, and that's why you're bringing them in.
Hey, just give me 10 seconds of your time. I really appreciate you listening to the episode so far, and I hope you're loving it. And if you are, I would love to ask you to subscribe to the channel, because what we do is a lot of work, and every week we bring you a new guest and a new story, and what we do requires so much love so that we can bring you something amazing. And every week we're trying really hard to get better guests that have better stories and improve our ability to tell their stories. So your subscription lets the algorithm know that what we're doing is fantastic. And no commitment, it's free to do. And if you don't like what we're doing later on, you can always unsubscribe. And either way, we would love a like if you don't feel like subscribing at this time. So what's the smallest number of, I don't know, call it subscribers or views, or like, what are the lowest amount in terms of metrics that someone's looking for where they start to be willing to sponsor someone?
Well, I think there's still like a fixation with like the less sophisticated marketers around like, getting like celebrities and like macro creators. But on down in the follower count and what we call like the nano and the micro, and these people with like 2, 3, 4, 5,000 followers and above, that's where you're seeing the highest performing content, the best return on investment for brands. So you don't need that many followers, just a few thousand on any given platform. focus on one or two platforms. Not people spend all their time on one platform and then TikTok goes away. That sucks. So like you can be a TikTok person, but also be have an Instagram Reels presence just in case. You can be a Substacker, but have a YouTube presence just in case. I mean, one of the great things about Substack, of course, is that you own those connections. But yeah, I think the follower counts matter less because now, a good 10-15% of the clients who work with us, they don't even want the follower. They don't even want the creator to post. They want the video. So they don't care how many followers you have. They care that you look the part, you can perform it.
Yeah, because the people that have come to me want it on my YouTube channel.
Yeah. Well, you have a good YouTube channel, so that makes sense. But there's a whole thing now of fake podcast UGC that's happening, where guys will set up like a situation that looks sort of like a Rogan. They've got the cool headphones and thing, and there's no real podcast, and they're just recording user generated content as if it were a podcast conversation, but it is really just like this to me is like it's sort of like the newest form of the TV advertising, we used to watch all the time, where it's pretending to be a talk show, but it's really just a sales show.
How do you pretend? I don't understand this.
I mean, you're not making a podcast. You're making a user generated conversation like you and I, and we're recording this and we package it. And then that becomes the ad. And it looks like you and I are having a podcast conversation, but in reality, this is an ad for an HR platform. But the viewer doesn't know that because it just shows up in their feed and they think it's two people like having like a podcast conversation.
I would do that if someone pays me.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's a bad. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm saying but you actually have a podcast. You're not just some guy like producing pretend podcast content.
Well, so I did recently interview two co-founders of a legal AI tech firm that was funded by Silicon Valley. And originally they wanted to be they wanted me to be an affiliate marketer for them and give me a percentage, whatever. And I was like, I'm sorry, I don't do affiliates because I can't feed my family on hope. But if you want to sponsor me, then you can sponsor me. And they agreed to be a sponsor. And when I was doing the calls with them, I was like, I like what you're doing. I want to interview you. Why don't we just sponsor your episode? And so I'll put your ads, I'll read your ads, but I'll write it and I'll read it, but I'll also interview you. It'll be a real interview, but also I'm promoting you at the same time. And they're like, okay, cool. So I like that idea, and I would like to do more of that, where I'm interviewing, funded founders from Silicon Valley that are doing cool stuff that I like while they're sponsoring the episode. So I get paid to interview them, basically.
Yeah, I mean that's just like a sponsored content play. That to me totally makes sense. And as long as you're like, you feel comfortable, you can maintain your audience like credibility, and you're like, you feel comfortable about the stuff you're endorsing, then I don't see any issue with that at all. It's like, it's the same thing.
One of the two interviews is my best performing video of all time.
Fantastic.
It's gotten 33,000 views.
So that's a win-win.
Yeah, they're happy with it. The funny thing is, it's the lawyer. So there's a co-founder, and then there's a lawyer who's the other co-founder. And because it's a legal AI play, you need a lawyer in the loop to make sure that the AI is doing things correctly. And the lawyer's interview did better than the technical interview, because in the technical interview, we were going into how you make the AI data not mess up. Where are you getting the data from? How are you training the models? We talked a lot about the infrastructure, the back end of how the system works, which for me is fascinating. I love those conversations. Not everyone is, but some people are. But yeah, I think the lawyer one got like 7,000 or 8,000 more views than the technical one.
Is there anything in the analytics? Like, did it get picked up by like a law blog? Did it get tweeted by like somebody? Did it get into some network that you don't usually get into?
I don't know. The thing is, I run ads on YouTube for almost every video to boost. Right, we've had this conversation. So I'm boosting the videos. So I put the same amount of money on both of the videos. One just performed better than the other. I don't know why. Maybe because they're Silicon Valley founders. Maybe because law is more interesting to people than tech. Not really sure. Maybe I had a better, interesting title than the other.
Yeah. And also,
Not
you're
sure.
you're really into the you and I have talked about YouTube. Gosh, the stills,
The thumbnails.
the thumbnails. Yeah, we've talked about thumbnail. You're like a thumbnail guy. You're like,
I'm trying. I try to focus on every aspect, right? Like Mr. Beast is so big because he's been obsessing over every tiny detail of everything you can obsess over for 10 years or so.
I read like a 10-page analysis of like Mr. Beast's thumbnails like a year or two ago, and I was totally convinced that like he had figured it out. And then once you are aware of like what he's doing, when you go on YouTube, you're like, oh, okay, that's like he invented this thing now. He figured out like what the algorithm likes.
Well, what the algorithm likes is what people like. The algorithm is looking for, I think there's 100 different signals that an individual viewer is giving off, like the conversion rate from the title and the thumbnail over to the
Yeah.
intro. How long are they staying on there? Are they watching something else after? Are they just leaving the platform after? There's a lot of details that
Yeah, I
YouTube.
feel like the Instagram Reels algorithm is so simple. It's like, are people stopping? What's the watch time and like share? It's so easy to kind of like figure out how to like create things that kind of like live in that short video world. YouTube's always been more of a black box to me. I've never been like a serious YouTube publisher versus like all the other channels that I have. So I've never like run my own YouTube channel or run a brand's YouTube channel. And I think, it's YouTube itself as a platform is different now than it was a year and a half ago, right? Like now the majority of YouTube views are happening on smart TVs, right? So like the entire experience people had with YouTube 10 years ago was always on their laptops or their phones, and now that experience is entirely different. So your viewers might be watching this, or 51% of them might be watching this like on a smart TV, and that's a whole different experience.
I actually saw that I think it's 90% of my people are watching from their phone.
Really,
Yeah.
that's pretty good. It's pretty mobile, pretty young, hip audience you've got.
Well, about half of them are 25 to 34.
That makes sense.
So they're probably used to listening to podcasts on the go. So it would
Yeah,
make sense to me. I don't know what percentage of them are premium users, but with premium YouTube, you can actually turn your screen off and put it in your pocket and keep going, and
right.
it'll keep playing. I buy premium for that reason exactly.
And this is why I don't. Yeah, this is why I don't watch. Like I'm like a Apple Podcast guy. Like I love podcasts, but I'm not like a YouTube podcaster. I have a podcast, a travel podcast, Out of Office, and we've been doing it for 5 years. And Apple Podcast, we get 15,000 downloads an episode, built like the old school audio way. We don't have any video component. We go on YouTube, but only because the podcast thing publishes there, and it's just audio. And we would love to do some video component of it. We just haven't. It's like a side project for us, and it's just it's like another level of commitment to do more video work. But when we launched the podcast 5 years ago, video podcasts were a thing, but they were a different animal. They were. Now I feel like there's been like a convergence where you're expected to do both.
My first 100 episodes were audio only, and then I started doing video, and I regretted not having 100 videos worth of content. And so I went back and I made audiograms that I uploaded to YouTube so that you could listen to it, but it looks like it's a video in a way. But it's like the audio that's like moving as the person's talking.
Right.
I still regret I don't have that content because I did video calls with the person as I was recording. I just didn't capture or edit the video. So I will never have access to that content, only the audio.
Well, we just made a decision on People First marketing team that we have a Substack. We got 4,000 subscribers. We've been it's a really quality strategy, social impact strategy newsletter, and now for every newsletter we produce, whoever writes the main essay has to do a 60-second explainer video along with it. So we're going to start like producing a piece of video content along with any other serious marketing collateral report, etc. Because we're producing all these great numbers and like we can get it into wonky people, but the level below the wonky, or we need the video to reach them, I think.
You can probably generate that video from the transcription. I mean, like AI could generate it completely with the voice of the person.
We want like
I know people
faces.
first.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Part of the
I know, but
brand. Part
like
of the
you
brand, Sean.
could.
Nope. So what I've been thinking on the travel podcast though is we got to be pretty close to an app that I can upload my podcast and say create like an animated video that like goes along with this podcast. Then it's a travel podcast. So it could, while we're talking, it could show Ireland, it could show whatever. So I feel like
Right.
with the audio, there must be a way to just backwards produce a bunch of like AI slop that that could go up on YouTube.
You could. The problem is, I'm imagining your podcast is 30 to 60 minutes.
Yeah, it's
It would be exorbitantly expensive to generate that kind of
yeah,
video from an AI
at this
rather
stage.
than using stock footage. If
Yeah.
you were to use an AI to find stock footage, not AI generated footage, you would be able to do that much faster and much cheaper.
I could probably just hire an editor to knock it out overseas,
You could,
and they'd use AI.
but how many episodes do you have that you'd have to generate content for? I imagine it's 100, 200 at least.
Almost 200. Yeah, too many.
It would be very difficult it would be costly as well. I'm actually I'm I'm going to be hitting 250 soon in this month. And I
That's a
was
lot.
thinking, yeah, well, I've been doing August is 5 years. So I was thinking, what if I were to extract the transcripts from every single one of the audios? I still, every time I upload a video, I extract the audio from it in order to publish on Acast, which then pushes to Spotify and iTunes.
Right.
So I have all of that, and I have half the transcripts because at some point I just said screw it, and I stopped doing transcripts. And I was thinking, if I could generate the other half of those transcripts, I could probably feed them into an AI, and the AI could probably extract one lesson from every interview and then collate it into, I don't know, an ebook or a website or something. And then I could create an AI assistant that's connected to that content so that you could query the assistant based on the content to find out information from it.
Right.
And whether that's a giveaway for everyone or whether I charge people, $5, $10, like one time, just thank you, for creating this. I don't know, but I feel like there's tremendous potential value in doing
That's
something like
cool.
that.
Yeah. No, I mean the yeah that's a fun idea. I mean, there's lots you can do with that data.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I could potentially create a report and sell it to other business owners. Over 5 years, I've spoken to 250 brand owners that are running 7 to 9 figure annual revenue brands. This is the thing that they're most concerned about. This is the thing they're
Yeah.
most excited about. This is the thing that they're focused on. These are the things that they're planning for, whatever. Although
Yeah.
if it's 5 years, the data gets skewed over that time. So what's something that I haven't asked you that you feel is really important to help close out this conversation?
I think that we touched on like the co-creation bit, but one thing I'll say is whether or not you are a creator who's trying to figure out how to build like sort of a niche specialty, or you're a small brand, this is a real opportunity for smaller brands and creators to sort of work together, help each other, figure out innovative ways to collaborate, and I think we're going to see the rise of creators as partners in companies, as CMOs, and we're entering sort of a really interesting age of marketing that's going to be divided between this incredible AI moment and this other sort of competing moment of influencer and creator. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.